Hi guys, good evening and welcome back once again to the EdWord. I'm your host Eddie, and in tonight's video I will be giving you my thoughts and overall feelings in reaction to the latest episode of the hit Max series that continues to deliver outstanding episodes one after another, The Last of Us. Got the newest episode, it dropped earlier tonight, just finished watching it, really liked it. Before I get into all of that, of course, please be warned, this will be a spoiler-filled review. We'll be talking spoilers from this, not only this episode, but from the previous bombshell episode that was last week, which was episode 2 of season 2. We will be referring to the events of that episode in this episode review. So if you're not caught up on The Last of Us, for God's sake, don't keep watching or listening to this review, as I will be discussing massive spoilers. That being said, you have been warned. Let's dive right back into it. First and foremost, this was a solid aftermath episode. If I remember a quote or something that Robert Kirkman, creator of The Walking Dead, once said after a particularly harsh and violent and unforgettable episode of The Walking Dead. In a behind-the-scenes look, he talked about how after an episode like that, you have to have some kind of aftermath episode showing how the characters are dealing with the fallout, the aftermath of what went down in the previous installment. And I feel like this episode of The Last of Us was a perfect example of that. We had a minor time jump. 3 months later, Jackson Hole is rebuilding itself. People are coming together, putting back together their supplies, their weapons, their walls. People are recovering from being in the hospital. And, Ellie has made a full physical recovery. I'm sure mentally she'll be tormented for years to come, until if and when she kills Abby, of course. I really enjoyed this whole episode, and granted, there wasn't a whole lot of necessarily exciting things happening. Like, it wasn't the action-packed spectacle that the last episode was, with the infected attacking Jackson Hole. Wasn't like that at all, but that's okay. I wasn't expecting it to be, because I figured we were in for a solid aftermath episode, an episode where we saw everybody picking up the pieces of everything that happened when it went down, the loss of Joel, the loss of so many others in their community, and now deciding what the hell they're going to do next. I think my favorite scene in this entire episode is during the town hall event, when the only person who vocally showed support in favor of sending a small regiment of soldiers after Abby and her people was the bigot Seth. Despite his hostility towards Dina and Ellie in the first episode, he was the only one who seemingly wanted justice or had a bloodthirst for vengeance, much like Ellie and Dina do, especially Ellie. And I'm sure Maria and Tommy were the only ones who voted yes or in favor of the mission, but everyone else on the council shot it down. But knowing Ellie and Dina, they weren't going to let that stop them. So now just the two of them are on their way to Seattle, which they got there pretty damn quick, by the way, because I feel like there's a good amount of distance between Wyoming and Oregon, unless I am completely wrong, which is a huge possibility because I have no sense of direction whatsoever. So maybe the two states are much closer to each other than I realize. I just thought they got there kind of fast. But on the plus side, they won't spend the rest of the season making this long-ass journey all the way to Seattle when they seemingly arrive there by the end of this episode, without a few hiccups along the way, finding this other group of survivors who I'm sure gamers probably know and recognize. I personally don't know who they are, or they were, because now they're all slaughtered, or at least that group was. And it's looking pretty likely that Abby and her people, or at least her people in terms of these wolves, were the ones who did it, as we saw an army of them patrolling the streets of Seattle. So why they would murder a bunch of refugees like that, I'm not sure. But shows you just what it gave us a tease by the end of this episode, what Dina and Ellie are up against in the next episode to come. But getting back to my favorite part of this episode reminded me of why I like this show so much and why I like shows like The Last of Us, like Walking Dead, for example. Complex characters in appalling situations and circumstances. Even characters who once hated each other sometimes end up becoming enemies, or at least tolerable acquaintances, and can still work with one another despite their differences despite their trivial past. And this episode was perfect proof of that, when Seth was the only one who showed outward support for going after Abby and her people, because he apparently cared for or liked and respected Joel enough to want vengeance or justice. You know, he gave Dina and Ellie a horse, gave them a better rifle, shook their hands, wished them the best of luck. Ellie was a bit reluctant at first, understandably so. But it just goes to show you that people aren't always how they immediately present themselves to be. That there's more layers to people than we realize or give them credit for. Yes, he shouldn't have said the things he said at the New Year's Eve dance, and Joel was right to push him to the ground. But it shows us that this guy isn't entirely all bad. There might be more gray to him than just black and white. So I really love that this episode gave us a taste of what I enjoy so much about shows, especially post-apocalyptic stories, where it's like characters who start off bad can sometimes end up being good, or if not entirely good, a chaotic good or a neutral good. And I really like that. I thought it was a nice touch how out of everybody in that town hall, he was the only one who said, no, fuck mercy, let's go get them. Let's send our troops after them and kill them for what they did to Joel. They could come back and do it to us. And I love the absolute look of shock and surprise, pleasant surprise, I'm sure, on Ellie's face, because she's like, wow, I wasn't expecting support from you, but okay. So I really enjoyed this episode a lot, specifically for that reason and that scene. And now that they're seemingly in Seattle right away, I guess we'll see what happens in next week's episode of how quickly they come across this army marching in the streets of Seattle, and if it'll actually lead them to Abby and her friends or not. So we'll have to keep watching, won't we? But overall, solid episode. Very, very, very good. Great aftermath episode. We got to check in on our surviving characters. We saw them rebuilding Jackson Hole. We saw how Ellie was making her physical recovery. I thought it was so perfect and so heartbreaking that the first time we see Ellie in this episode is that we see her waking up from her physical wound, and her first reaction is just to scream at the memory, the trauma that has been inflicted upon her upon witnessing Joel's death like that. I thought it was very fitting, very heartbreaking, but that would be a very fitting, logical reaction to anybody who had endured an incident like that. So I thought, yeah, that's about how it would go, or how they would react. So, well done, Last of Us. Well done. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching my episode review. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. What did you guys think of it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings. Don't forget to comment on this video and like and subscribe as well. And I will see you next week for hopefully another great episode of The Last of Us and another exciting episode review once it drops. So thanks so much for watching again. Have a great rest of your night. The Last of Us drops new episodes every Sunday on Max. And of course, until next time, may the Force be with you.